What if clarity isn't something you're born with, but something the world teaches you to lose? What if confusion isn't chaos, but a system designed to keep your mind obedient? Most people don't fail to think clearly because they're stupid. They fail because they've been trained to obey noise. Attention is the new territory, and whoever controls your attention controls your reality. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." He wasn't describing evil, he was describing structure, the structure of manipulation. Society isn't built on clarity, it's built on confusion, because confusion creates dependency. The more unsure you are, the easier it is to be led. Every generation is given new tools, but the same mental chains. They call it the information age, but that's a lie. It's the distraction age. You are surrounded by too much data and not enough direction. Infinite input, zero inner compass. They don't need to control your body anymore. They only need to overload your perception, because an overwhelmed mind stops thinking and starts reacting. Most people live inside what I call the fog. It's not ignorance, it's overstimulation. You scroll, you consume, you compare, and your mind becomes a shattered mirror. Every reflection looks like truth, but none of it belongs to you. Clarity is not a comfortable state, it's confrontation. When you see clearly, you have to face how much of your life was built on autopilot. Most people avoid clarity because it demands accountability. It strips away illusion. It kills who you pretended to be. That's why people prefer noise. It gives them something to hide behind. True clarity feels like loneliness at first, because you start seeing through everyone else's masks. Friends become echoes, entertainment becomes distraction, and silence becomes sacred. Thinking clearly isn't about intelligence, it's about filters. The wise don't think faster. They think slower because they pause before believing. The first filter is silence. Spend more time alone than entertained. You'll start to hear your original thoughts again. The second filter is simplicity. If an idea can't be explained simply, it's either manipulation or confusion. The third filter is source. Always ask, who benefits from me believing this? Every narrative has an author. Find them or you'll live by their story. When you master these filters, you stop being a pawn in other people's propaganda. You stop being emotionally hijacked. You start thinking like a sovereign. The human mind was never meant to drown in noise. It was designed to channel divinity. But clarity is not given. It's earned. You earn it by walking away from the crowd, by questioning everything that feels normal, by remembering that the clearest mind is the one that no longer fears being alone. The ones who will rule the next age won't be the loudest, but the clearest. Because clarity is power, and in a world addicted to confusion, the one who sees clearly commands. We live in an emotional economy. Everything is engineered to trigger, not teach. Social media doesn't care about truth. It cares about engagement. Anger and fear keep you scrolling. Peace and clarity make you stop. That's why outrage spreads faster than wisdom. That's why people defend lies that feel good instead of truths that feel heavy. The modern mind is reactive, not reflective. And when emotion drives thought, clarity becomes impossible. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He said, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." Today, deception isn't done through lies. It's done through emotion. You don't need soldiers when you have algorithms. You don't need chains when people willingly hand over their focus. The empire of confusion runs on dopamine. The real war isn't physical, it's psychological. It's spiritual, and most people don't even know they're soldiers in it. To think clearly, you have to reprogram your perception. You have to build what I call mental sovereignty. That means reclaiming your right to think slow in a world that rushes your reaction. It means developing an inner standard that no algorithm can rewrite. Train your mind to see patterns, not moments. To look for motives, not messages. To listen to what's not being said just as much as what is. Because clarity isn't seeing more, it's seeing through. Here's a truth most won't admit. Confusion feels safe. It gives you permission to delay. If you're confused, you don't have to decide. You don't have to act. You can keep scrolling, keep talking, keep pretending you're learning. That's why people stay in fog. It's comfortable, because when you finally see clearly, you can't unsee. And when you can't unsee, you have to move. So they choose blindness. They choose distraction. They choose to be busy instead of conscious. Because clarity forces transformation, and transformation hurts. But pain isn't punishment, it's purification. Every time you sit with your thoughts, something false burns away. Every time you detach from chaos, something real begins to form. This is what the ancients meant by awakening. It's not about positivity, it's about power. It's about learning to see the invisible architecture that shapes human behavior. When you understand power, you stop being prey to it. You start playing the game consciously. You become strategic. You learn when to speak, when to stay silent, when to act, when to disappear. You stop reacting. You start creating. The ones who will rule the next age one to be the loudest, they'll be the clearest. Because clarity is the new dominance. The calmest mind becomes the most dangerous weapon. The one who can see through illusion controls the illusion. And that's what this channel exists for. To guide you through the mental architecture of power, wisdom, and transformation. To reprogram the subconscious mind for sovereignty. To sharpen perception until it cuts through manipulation. To help you see yourself as the architect of your own reality. The fog is thick, but clarity is coming for those who choose it. This is your reminder. Peace is power. Focus is wealth. And in a world addicted to confusion, seeing clearly is rebellion. Clarity begins when you stop moving just to feel alive. Most people think they're chasing purpose, but they're really just running from silence. They confuse movement for meaning, productivity for peace. The truth is, you can't see the water's depth when it's always disturbed. Stillness reveals what motion hides. That's why everything around you is built to keep you busy. Your notifications, your timelines, your feeds, all designed to keep your attention fragmented. They don't want you to rest. They want you reactive, because a reactive mind can be directed. An overstimulated mind can be controlled. You think you're choosing what to watch, but the algorithm is choosing what you become. Every scroll is a small hypnosis. Every soundbite is another string pulled. You stop thinking in paragraphs and start thinking in captions. You stop forming opinions and start recycling trends. You become fluent in distraction and illiterate in introspection. They call it content, but it's really containment. An endless loop where the illusion of choice keeps you compliant. You think you're exploring the world through your screen, but really, the world is exploring you. Collecting your thoughts, your patterns, your emotions. You become a mirror reflecting what the system feeds you. Clarity can't survive that kind of environment. It requires friction. It requires the courage to unplug from the hive. Because when you detach, you don't just lose stimulation, you regain sovereignty. When you first step out of the noise, it feels like dying. Because in a way it is. The self that was addicted to constant validation begins to starve. The ego that fed on attention begins to panic. You'll feel empty, lonely, lost. But what you're really feeling is withdrawal from the drug of distraction. Every addict thinks boredom is the enemy. But boredom is actually the detox. It's the mind cleaning itself. It's silence reminding you that peace isn't entertainment. It's energy management. Once you sit in that silence long enough, the noise in your head starts to fade. And then something powerful happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again. Not society's thoughts, not trends, not timelines. Yours. This is the point where most people turn back, because self-confrontation is the real work. When you finally see yourself without filters, you realize clarity isn't comfortable. It's surgical. It cuts away illusion. It kills who you pretended to be. But that's the price of truth, losing the version of you that fit in. You start noticing how much of what you thought was you was really conditioning. The opinions you defend aren't yours. The dreams you chase were programmed into you. The people you compare yourself to were planted as distractions. Every reflection you see online is just another way to measure your worth externally. And that's how you lose your internal compass. When you can't think clearly, you don't make choices. You follow impulses. You don't have opinions. You download them. And the more you consume, the more you're consumed. The fog feeds on confusion. It needs you anxious, uncertain, and overstimulated, because confusion breeds compliance. When you don't know what's real, you'll accept whatever feels easiest. That's how they sell obedience, dressed as convenience. But here is the truth they don't teach. Clarity is the highest form of power. Because once you see the game, you can't be played. Once you master your attention, you master your reality. And once you stop chasing validation, you become untouchable. The thinkers will inherit the future, not the loud, not the busy, not the viral. The ones who can still think for themselves when everyone else is performing. That's the new elite. Minds immune to manipulation. Silence isn't absence, it's access. It's the frequency where truth whispers. When you can finally hear that, you start building from intuition, not insecurity. You stop reacting to the world and start creating it. That's where focus becomes wealth. Because attention, pure, directed, disciplined attention, is the rarest resource left. And the world is starving for people who can still hold it. So protect yours like gold. Don't waste it on everything that screams for it. Reserve it for what builds your mind, expands your vision, and aligns with your mission. Because your attention is your vote, and every scroll is a ballot. The fog will try to pull you back in. It will whisper through trends. It will lure you with comfort, entertainment, validation. But you've seen too much now. You know that comfort is the new cage, and silence is the key that opens it. When the world runs on confusion, clarity becomes currency. When the world runs on noise, focus becomes rebellion. And when the world runs on lies, truth becomes the new luxury. So breathe, detach, observe. Don't let the world think for you. Because if they can program your attention, they can program your emotions. If they can program your emotions, they can program your actions. And if they can program your actions they own your destiny. But once you reclaim your focus, once you see through the fog, you become what they fear most, a free mind. And a free mind is contagious, because clarity spreads faster than confusion. And truth, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who can see through it. More people who can pause before they react, think before they share, feel before they perform. People who lead from awareness, not algorithm. So the next time the world tries to rush you, slow down. When it tries to scare you, get still. When it tries to distract you, remember, attention is the new battlefield. Guard your mind like it's sacred, because it is. Guarding your mind doesn't mean hiding from the world. It means standing in it, aware. Most people confuse awareness with anxiety. They think paying attention means panicking. But true awareness is silent. It watches everything without losing itself in the motion. That's clarity. The ability to observe the storm without becoming the storm. The reason most people can't think clearly is because their perception has been colonized. Not by governments, but by algorithms, by trends, by the invisible incentives that decide what deserves your focus. Every scroll trains your nervous system. Every notification rewards your reaction. Over time, your attention, that sacred force, gets fragmented into 1,000 tiny compulsions. You start to mistake movement for progress. You confuse visibility with purpose. The fog loves that, because as long as you keep chasing stimulation, you'll never have to confront silence. And silence is where your real thoughts live. The truth is, you're not supposed to consume information at this scale. The human mind was designed for presence, for stories told by faces, not screens. But we built an economy that thrives on your distraction, an attention market, and every tap, every scroll, every like is a transaction, a tiny sale of your awareness. You become the product. The fog profits from your confusion. That's why clarity feels like rebellion. Because to think clearly today is to opt out of the default program. It means slowing down while everyone else is speeding up. It means choosing depth over dopamine. It means realizing that every thought you borrow costs you originality. When your mind is constantly reacting, it can't create. It's like trying to sculpt while your hands are shaking. The art becomes messy. The vision gets distorted. You can't see the form of truth through trembling. So the first step toward clarity isn't learning more. It's unlearning the noise. Ask yourself, when was the last time you had a thought that didn't come from somewhere else? When was the last time you felt something that wasn't pre-approved by a trend? Most people don't realize they've outsourced their emotions. Their curiosity, their outrage, they're living as extensions of the feed. The fog doesn't have to censor you when it can distract you into silence. Distraction is the new censorship. And the cost of endless stimulation is the death of reflection. Clarity demands subtraction. You have to prune your perception like a garden. Remove the weeds of comparison. the overgrowth of opinions, the invasive species of fear, because every unnecessary input takes space from insight. That's why clarity feels like rebellion. Because to think clearly today is to opt out of the default program. It means slowing down while everyone else is speeding up. It means choosing depth over dopamine. It means realizing that every thought you borrow costs you originality. When your mind is constantly reacting, it can't create. It's like trying to sculpt while your hands are shaking. The art becomes messy. The vision gets distorted. You can't see the form of truth through trembling. So the first step toward clarity isn't learning more. It's unlearning the noise. Ask yourself, when was the last time you had a thought that didn't come from somewhere else? When was the last time you felt something that wasn't pre-approved by a trend? Most people don't realize they've outsourced their emotions, their curiosity, their outrage. They're living as extensions of the feed. The fog doesn't have to censor you when it can distract you into silence. Distraction is the new censorship. And the cost of endless stimulation is the death of reflection. Clarity demands subtraction. You have to prune your perception like a garden, remove the weeds of comparison, the overgrowth of opinions, the invasive species of fear. Because every unnecessary input takes space from insight. That's why it rewards outrage but not understanding, noise but not nuance, emotion but not empathy. It feeds you conflict because clarity doesn't click as fast. Confusion keeps the economy alive. If you could see clearly, you'd consume less. You'd chase less. You'd compare less. And that would collapse entire industries built on your insecurity. That is why every advertisement whispers the same mantra: you are not enough. Yet, clarity destroys that lie. Because when you can see clearly, you realize you already are. That realization that you're already enough is dangerous to a system built on lack. Because once you stop needing to be validated, you become unpredictable. You stop chasing illusions. You start asking real questions. And that's when the fog starts to fear you. When you begin to think for yourself, the world starts to glitch. You start noticing how much of normal is actually programming. How most people's opinions aren't built, they're downloaded. You can feel the pattern repeating. The same phrases, same outrage cycles, same emotional cues. It's all mimicry. Manufactured thought loops designed to keep you compliant. That's the essence of modern control. It's not force, it's frequency. They don't silence you, they overload you. They don't block truth. They bury it under 10,000 half-truths until you forget what real even feels like. It's not censorship, it's saturation. And in that oversupply of information, the average mind collapses under the weight of options. You don't know what to believe anymore, so you stop believing anything. That's not ignorance, that's engineered apathy. A mind too tired to discern truth becomes a mind easy to direct. That's how they win. Not through control of what you think, but through exhaustion of your capacity to think at all. Mental fatigue is the new obedience. You can't rebel if you're too distracted to care. That's why clarity is rare. It takes discipline to unplug, to say no to noise in a world that rewards reaction, to build inner silence in a culture that fears stillness. Clarity isn't a vibe, it's a practice. It's built in the moments you choose to stop scrolling and start observing. When you resist the reflex to respond and instead reflect. Because once you start observing the noise instead of participating in it, you shift from being programmed to being aware. And awareness is power. Most people think clarity means knowing what's true, but real clarity is knowing what's not. It's discernment, the art of separating signal from simulation. Discernment doesn't come from knowledge, it comes from alignment. When your mind, body, and spirit move in rhythm, your perception sharpens. You start feeling when something's off before you can explain why. That's your internal compass, your intuition, coming back online. But to hear it, you have to quiet everything else. That's the paradox. The clearer your mind becomes, the louder the world feels. You start seeing through the facades, through the false urgency, through the emotional manipulation that drives most conversations. It's unsettling at first, because you realize how much of what people call thinking is actually reacting. How most conversations aren't exchanges of ideas. They're battles of ego. How rarely people listen with the intent to understand, not just respond. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You stop craving to be understood by the fog-minded. You stop trying to convince. You realize clarity is its own reward. Not everyone's supposed to get it. Because the truth isn't designed for the crowd, it's designed for the courageous. To see clearly in a confused world will make you seem insane, because sanity has been redefined as conformity. You'll start to feel out of rhythm with everyone else. Slower, quieter, deeper. That's not isolation, that's elevation. You've stepped outside the algorithmic trance. You're no longer consuming the current. You are the current. And that's when something shifts. Your thoughts start creating reality instead of reacting to it. See? Most people live downstream of the world. They wait for culture, trends, or other people's emotions to tell them who to be. But the few who cultivate clarity, they live upstream. They influence the flow. They design the new language, the new systems, the new values. Clarity creates current. Noise consumes it. That's why the ancient mystics, the philosophers, the inventors, they all said the same thing in different words. Know thyself. Because the moment you truly know yourself, you stop being programmable. You stop mistaking stimulation for purpose. You start creating from stillness. And creation from stillness is what builds worlds. That's how consciousness expands, not through chaos, but through coherence. When your inner world becomes organized, your outer world follows. That's why the system keeps you disorganized. Because an organized mind doesn't panic. It doesn't overconsume. It doesn't need validation. It moves with precision, like a frequency that can't be interfered with. That's what mental sovereignty is, when your attention belongs to you again. But sovereignty starts small. It starts with reclaiming seconds, moments between the noise. When you stop mid-scroll and realize, wait, why am I here? What am I feeding my mind? Awareness compounds. Every time you pause, you build a microsecond of power. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you sharpen the lens of perception. That's how clarity grows, not in big breakthroughs, but through micro-disciplines. You can't think clearly if your nervous system is fried. That's why clarity isn't just mental, it's physical. The body and mind are one circuit. If your body is overstimulated, your thoughts will be too. That's why silence feels healing, because silence regulates the nervous system. It recalibrates the electrical flow between thought and emotion. That's also why nature feels peaceful. It operates on truth. It doesn't perform, it just is. When you spend enough time in that energy, your mind starts syncing with that natural rhythm again. Your internal noise lowers, and when the noise lowers, truth becomes audible. That's when your ideas get sharper. Your intuition becomes accurate. Your emotions start obeying your awareness instead of controlling it. You don't get overwhelmed by the storm anymore because you realize you are the sky. The storm passes through you, not over you. That's clarity. It's not detachment, it's dominance. You're not escaping reality. You're mastering your experience of it. The clearer you think, the less reactive you become. The less reactive you become, the more powerful your actions are. Reaction is fast, but it's fragile. Response is slow, but it's sovereign. That's why the world trains you to react. Because reaction is predictable. It keeps you looping inside the fog. But the moment you start responding instead of reacting, you break the loop. You start seeing time differently. You stop rushing. You start noticing patterns. That's when you move from being a consumer of reality to being a constructor of it. See the future one to belong to those who know the most. It'll belong to those who can think the clearest, because information is infinite. Clarity is scarce, and in an infinite world, scarcity equals value. That's why cultivating clarity is the new form of wealth. Not digital wealth, not social wealth, mental wealth. Because your ability to think clearly determines how effectively you can move, create, and lead. Most people chase currency without realizing that clarity is currency. It's the root of all strategy, creation, and innovation. Without clarity, even abundance feels empty. With clarity, even simplicity feels rich. That's the secret. Your internal state defines your external experience. And when you master your mind, everything else starts aligning naturally. You don't chase, you attract. You don't compete, you create. You don't conform, you construct. Because now you're not operating from confusion. You're operating from coherence. So guard your mind. Protect your focus. Move like someone who knows silence is strategy. Because in a world built to confuse you, calm is your weapon. Discipline is your rebellion. And clarity, is your crown. You are the algorithm now. This is Prophetrix. If this message reached you, it was meant to. Subscribe, share the frequency, and keep your mind sharp.